Out of everyone they could have tested, challenged, or tried to control, somehow they ended up standing in front of you. At first, that feels personal, maybe even unfair. But here's what most people never realize. People who rely on intimidation rarely move at random. They look for signals: hesitation, kindness mistaken for weakness, silence mistaken for surrender. They don't see who you are. They see who they assume you'll be. That's how these patterns begin. Someone walks into a room believing they've already figured everyone out. They think they know who will fold under pressure, who will chase approval, who will react without thinking. They expect the same script they've seen 100 times before. Push a little, watch someone panic, raise the pressure, watch them lose themselves. It has worked often enough that they stop questioning it. But appearances have a way of telling incomplete stories. The quietest person isn't always the most fragile. The calmest face doesn't always belong to someone who lacks strength. Sometimes silence isn't uncertainty. Sometimes it's discipline. Sometimes the person who says the least has already survived battles no one else could see. That's the mistake they make. They notice your restraint, but they don't understand where it came from. They see patience and assume passivity. They see composure and mistake it for fear. They measure you with the wrong ruler because they're only looking at the surface. And that's where their confidence begins to betray them. Real strength rarely introduces itself. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't rush to prove anything. It simply waits until the moment arrives when pretending is no longer possible. The truth is, intimidation depends on one thing above everything else: your reaction. The moment you allow someone else to dictate your emotions, they've already begun shaping the outcome. But what happens when that reaction never comes? What happens when the person they expected to shake simply stays steady? That's the question they never prepared for. Because they thought they understood you before they ever spoke to you, they didn't. And before this is over, they're going to discover just how dangerous assumptions can be. Not because of force, but because quiet self-control changes the entire game. The real question isn't why they came after you. The real question is what they thought they saw and what they completely missed. Long before they crossed your path, their reputation had already arrived. Not because they left behind broken buildings or dramatic scenes, but because they left behind something harder to repair. Opportunities, confidence. The people who underestimated how easily they could manipulate a situation often walked away questioning themselves instead of questioning the one who created the chaos. That's how certain people build influence. They don't need to raise their voice every time. They don't need to prove they're the strongest in the room. Over the years, they've learned how to read hesitation, exploit insecurity, and turn uncertainty into leverage. Wherever they go, stories seem to follow. Stories about how they always come out on top. About how nobody ever stands in their way for long. And stories have a strange kind of power. The more those stories spread, the less effort they have to make. People begin intimidating themselves before a single word is spoken. They expect defeat because they've already accepted someone else's reputation as reality. That invisible weight becomes their greatest weapon. They've watched friendships fall apart because of pride. They've seen careers collapse under pressure. They've witnessed people abandon their own conviction just to avoid conflict. Again and again. They convinced themselves that every victory proved they understood human nature better than everyone else. Eventually, confidence hardened into certainty. They stopped seeing individuals. They started seeing patterns. To them, everyone became predictable. Every conversation followed the same script. Every challenge ended the same way. Push hard enough, wait long enough, and eventually people reveal their fears. At least, that's what they believed. What they never considered was that repetition can become its own blind spot. Winning the same psychological battles over and over can create an illusion of invincibility. Success has a way of convincing people that their methods will always work, that every new encounter will unfold exactly like the last one. But life doesn't repeat itself forever. Sooner or later, every pattern meets the one person it wasn't designed for. Not because that person is louder, not because they're more aggressive, but because they're playing a completely different game. While one side depends on intimidation, the other depends on awareness. While one side searches for reactions, the other has learned the value of restraint. And that's the kind of difference no reputation can predict. For the first time in a long time, the script they relied on begins to feel unfamiliar. The pressure is the same, the tactics are the same, but somehow, the outcome no longer feels guaranteed. And that's when something unexpected begins to happen. The confidence they've carried for years starts meeting something it has rarely encountered before. A person who refuses to let someone else's history define their own response. The biggest mistake people make isn't underestimating strength. It's misunderstanding what strength looks like. Most people have been conditioned to believe power is loud. It's the person who dominates every conversation, demands attention, or never backs down from an argument. They assume confidence must announce itself. So when they meet someone who listens more than they speak, who stays calm under pressure, or who doesn't rush to defend every opinion, they reach the easiest conclusion. They're weak. That's the illusion they fell for. They watched you stay quiet and assumed you had nothing to say. They saw your patience and mistook it for hesitation. They noticed your willingness to avoid unnecessary conflict and decided you were afraid of it. But restraint and fear have never been the same thing. Anyone can react. Anyone can lose control when emotions take over. It takes far more discipline to remain steady when every instinct tells you to prove yourself. The strongest people often have the least interest in performing their strength for an audience. Yet those who rely on intimidation rarely understand that. They're searching for visible signs of confidence because that's all they've ever trusted. If you aren't competing for attention, they assume you've already surrendered it. If you don't respond to every challenge, they imagine they've already won. In reality, they're reading the wrong signals. Because some people become quiet, not because life has been easy, but because life has already taught them the cost of reacting too quickly. They've learned that every battle doesn't deserve their energy. Every opinion doesn't deserve a response. Every provocation doesn't deserve a reaction. That lesson changes everything. You stopped measuring yourself by how loudly you could speak. You started measuring yourself by how well you could remain grounded when the pressure increased. That's a different kind of confidence, one that doesn't need applause to feel real. The irony is almost impossible to miss. The very qualities they dismissed were the qualities forged through experience. Your composure wasn't an accident. Your patience wasn't weakness. Your silence wasn't emptiness. It was evidence that your identity no longer depends on someone else's expectations. And that's the part they never saw. Because while they were busy deciding who they thought you were quietly becoming someone they didn't know how to predict. That's when the balance begins to shift. Not because they've changed, but because the story they've been telling themselves about you is about to collide with the truth of who you really are. What they never saw was everything that happened before they ever met you. They only saw the version of you standing in front of them. Calm, reserved, unshaken. They never saw the countless moments that shaped that quiet confidence. They weren't there for the nights when doubt was louder than hope. They didn't witness the disappointments that forced you to rebuild your expectations. They never felt the weight of the seasons when it seemed like progress had disappeared, and all you had left was the choice to keep going. Those moments don't usually make headlines. They happen in silence. They happen when no one is watching. That's where real resilience is formed. It's built every time you choose to continue after something falls apart. Every time you accept a lesson instead of carrying bitterness. Every time life strips away another illusion and leaves you with a clearer understanding of yourself. None of those victories are loud. Most people will never notice them. But they change you, slowly, permanently. The person standing before them isn't the same person who first encountered disappointment or rejection. Each difficult season refined something inside you, not by making life easier, but by teaching you what truly deserves your energy. You learned that not every setback is a punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes what feels like being held back is actually an opportunity to become steadier before the next challenge arrives. That kind of growth is easy to overlook because it isn't designed to impress anyone. It's designed to endure. People often assume strength should be obvious. They expect it to look dramatic, confident, and impossible to ignore. But the strongest foundations are usually hidden beneath the surface. A towering structure isn't secure because of what everyone sees. It's secure because of what no one notices. Your inner foundation was built the same way. With every difficult conversation you survived, with every expectation you released, with every lonely season that taught you how to stand without constant reassurance. Those experiences didn't make you perfect. They made you present, more observant, less reactive, more willing to pause before responding. That's the kind of strength that can't be borrowed or faked, because it was earned one quiet decision at a time. And that's why they misjudged you. They measured your surface while your real preparation existed beneath it. They believed confidence had to announce itself, never realizing that genuine confidence rarely needs an introduction. By the time they recognized the difference, your greatest advantage had already been established. Not in the moment they challenged you, but in every unseen moment that prepared you long before they arrived. 'Cause real strength is rarely about appearance. It's about preparation. And preparation has a way of revealing itself precisely when it matters most. Fear has a goal. It doesn't always want to defeat you. Most of the time, it simply wants to make you forget who you are. That's why intimidation rarely begins with force. It begins with emotion, a sharp comment, a calculated look, A moment designed to make your heartbeat race just enough that your judgment starts slipping away. The moment emotions take control, clarity begins to fade. And when clarity fades, people often make choices they later regret. That's the pattern, not because people are weak, but because they're human. When pressure appears unexpectedly, the mind searches for immediate relief. It wants to defend itself, explain itself, prove itself. It whispers, "React now. Say something. Do anything." But urgency is not always wisdom. In fact, the strongest emotional traps depend on convincing you that every moment demands an instant response. It doesn't. The people who rely on intimidation understand this better than most. Whether consciously or unconsciously, they know that if they can control your emotional state, they no longer have to control the situation. Once your attention is consumed by anger, fear, or the need to prove yourself, your focus shifts away from what actually matters. That's why calm can be so disruptive. Not because it magically solves every problem, but because it interrupts the pattern. The expected script begins to fall apart. Instead of feeding the tension, you observe it. Instead of matching someone else's emotional intensity, you stay connected to your own values. That pause, however brief, creates space for better decisions, and space changes everything. It reminds you that you don't have to borrow someone else's urgency. You don't have to let another person's behavior determine your next move. You can notice the pressure without becoming the pressure. You can acknowledge fear without letting it write your story. That kind of awareness is quiet, but it is powerful, because the moment you stop reacting automatically, you begin responding intentionally. Your choices become guided by purpose instead of impulse. And people who expected to control the conversation suddenly find themselves facing something unfamiliar, someone who cannot be rushed into becoming someone they're not. That's when the real shift begins. You realize this was never about proving who was stronger. It was about discovering who remained steady when the pressure invited everyone else to lose themselves. And once you see that, you understand the contest was never truly physical. It was always psychological. Every pattern has a breaking point. For a long time, they believed they had people figured out. Pressure someone long enough, and eventually they'd crack. Raise the tension, question their confidence, challenge their identity, and sooner or later they'd react. That expectation became part of their confidence. It wasn't just a strategy anymore. It was the lens through which they viewed everyone they met. Then they met you. At first, nothing seemed different. The same subtle tests, the same attempts to create doubt, the same expectation that you would rush to defend yourself or prove your worth. They waited for the familiar signs: frustration, panic, the need to win every exchange. But those signs never came. Not because you didn't feel pressure. You did. You simply refused to let that pressure decide your next move. That single choice changed everything. The silence they expected to break became steady. The patience they mistook for weakness became impossible to shake. Every moment they expected an emotional reaction. They were met instead with composure, not coldness, not indifference. Just the quiet confidence of someone who understands that not every challenge deserves immediate engagement. And that's when uncertainty found its way to the other side. For the first time, their usual approach stopped producing familiar results. The script they'd relied on for so long no longer fit the person standing in front of them. Every attempt to pull you into their rhythm only highlighted that you were following your own. That's the turning point people rarely notice. Real power doesn't always announce itself with a dramatic victory. Sometimes it reveals itself in the moment someone realizes they can no longer predict you. When your peace can't be purchased with approval or stolen through pressure, the entire dynamic begins to change, because influence depends on expectation, and expectations lose their power the moment they stop being true. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the confidence they carried so easily begins to shift. Not because you've defeated them, but because they've encountered something they never prepared for. A person who won't hand over control of their emotions. The louder the pressure becomes, the clearer your choices remain. The more they search for a reaction, the more obvious it becomes that your identity isn't built on proving them wrong. It's built on staying true to what you've already learned. And in that quiet realization, the balance starts to move, not through force, not through revenge, but through the simple, disciplined decision to remain grounded when someone else expected you to fall apart. That's when the illusion of certainty begins to crack. And once a person starts questioning the strategy they've always trusted, their outward confidence is no longer as solid as it appears. There comes a moment when silence says more than any argument ever could. Most people are taught that influence belongs to the loudest voice. Speak first. Defend yourself immediately. Fill every pause before someone else does. The world rewards speed so often that it mistakes it for wisdom. But wisdom has never been measured by how quickly you respond. It's measured by whether your response still reflects who you are. That's why silence changes the equation. Not because silence is magical, and not because every situation calls for it, but because a deliberate pause creates something that emotional reactions cannot: clarity. It gives you the chance to observe before you assume, to understand before you answer, to choose your next step instead of letting pressure choose it for you. People who depend on emotional momentum rarely expect that. They expect you to match their pace, to mirror their frustration, to chase the last word as if winning the moment means winning the outcome. But when you refuse to enter that rhythm, something unexpected happens. The noise loses its grip. You begin noticing things you would have missed before. The insecurity hidden behind confidence. The urgency beneath the pressure. The difference between what someone says and what they're trying to accomplish. Observation becomes more valuable than impulse, and patience becomes more effective than proving yourself. That doesn't make you passive, it makes you intentional. Because restraint isn't the absence of strength, it's strength under direction. Anyone can speak when emotions are running high. Fewer people can stay connected to their values while the room is pulling them toward reaction. That's where real influence begins. Not in controlling another person, but in refusing to surrender control of yourself. The more you practice that discipline, the less your identity depends on the approval, criticism, or expectations of those around you. Your center of gravity moves. It no longer rests in the opinions outside you. It rests in the principles within you. And once that shift happens, everything else starts to look different. The conversation is no longer about them. The real work has always been happening inside you. The greatest battle you will ever fight is the one no one else can see. It isn't the argument in front of you. It isn't the pressure someone tries to place on your shoulders. It isn't even the person who believes they understand you. Those are only reflections of something deeper, because every external challenge eventually leads to the same quiet question. Asterisk, who are you when no one is watching? That's where the real battle begins. Fear has a voice. It tells you to protect your image at all costs. It convinces you that one mistake defines your future. It whispers that if people misunderstand you, you've already lost. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks so softly that you mistake it for your own thoughts. Then there's ego. Ego isn't just arrogance. More often, it's the desperate need to be seen, to be right, to prove your worth to people who were never going to understand you in the first place. It keeps you trapped in battles that don't deserve your energy because it confuses recognition with value. And then comes self-doubt, perhaps the quietest opponent of them all. It remembers every failure you've tried to forget, every opportunity that slipped away, every moment you questioned whether you were enough. Left unchecked, it can turn temporary setbacks into permanent identities. But here's what changes everything. None of these voices disappear overnight. Strength isn't pretending they never exist. Strength is learning that you don't have to obey every thought that passes through your mind. You can acknowledge fear without surrendering to it. You can notice your ego without allowing it to lead your decisions. You can hear self-doubt without accepting it as truth. That is emotional maturity, not becoming fearless, but becoming wiser about what deserves your attention. The person standing before you may believe the greatest contest is between two individuals. They couldn't be more mistaken. The real contest has always been between your highest values and your lowest impulses, between clarity and confusion, between patience and panic. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, discipline over impulse, and purpose over pride, something inside you becomes stronger. And that strength doesn't depend on whether anyone else notices, because the deepest victories are often invisible. They happen the moment you stop measuring your life by the conflicts you win and start measuring it by the person you're becoming. That's when everything changes. You realize that defeating another person was never the goal. The true victory is becoming someone who no longer needs conflict to prove their strength. And once you understand that, victory itself begins to take on an entirely different meaning. And then they finally see it. Not all at once, not with some dramatic revelation, but in small moments that slowly become impossible to ignore. They expected hesitation, yet they found patience. They expected anger, yet they found clarity. They expected someone desperate to defend every accusation, every misunderstanding, every challenge. Instead, they encountered someone who had already learned that peace doesn't need constant permission from the outside world. That's the discovery they never anticipated. They thought they were facing a person. In reality, they were facing every lesson that person had already survived. Every disappointment that taught you resilience. Every season of uncertainty that strengthened your patience. Every lonely chapter that forced you to discover your own voice instead of borrowing someone else's. None of those experiences were visible when they first looked at you. But now they are, not because you've told your story, because your choices reveal it. Anyone can appear confident when life is easy. The deeper kind of confidence shows itself when pressure arrives. and your character remains intact. That's the difference they failed to recognize. They measured your appearance while your real strength had been quietly developing beneath the surface for years. And that realization changes everything. Because once someone understands they can no longer predict your reactions, they also realize they can no longer define your identity. Their assumptions lose their influence. Their expectations stop carrying the same weight. The image they created of you begins to collapse under the evidence of who you actually are. You didn't become stronger in this moment. You simply revealed the strength that had been there all along. That's what surprises them the most. The person they expected to break had already endured battles that required far more courage than this one. The pressure they believed would overwhelm you became another opportunity to practice what life had already been teaching you. Stay grounded, stay aware, and let your actions speak louder than your emotions. That is the discovery. Not that you're unstoppable, not that you'll never face fear again, but that your foundation no longer depends on circumstances or someone else's opinion. And once that truth becomes visible, the story is no longer about proving yourself to anyone else. It's about quietly walking forward with the confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. Because from this point on, your greatest strength isn't something you have to display. It's simply something you live. Eventually, the truth becomes impossible to ignore, not because you stood taller, not because you spoke louder, not because you defeated anyone in a dramatic display of strength, but because you refused to become someone else under pressure. That's the moment they finally understand. For so long, they believed influence came from creating fear. They thought control belonged to the person who could make others second-guess themselves, abandon their values, or react without thinking. It worked often enough that they mistook it for real power. But then they met someone who wouldn't hand over that control. Someone who could feel pressure without becoming pressure. Someone who could hear criticism without letting it define their identity. Someone who understood that another person's behavior does not have to become your own. And that changes everything. Because the most unsettling person in any difficult situation isn't always the strongest, the loudest, or the most intimidating. It's the one who cannot be easily manipulated, the one who doesn't chase every argument, the one who doesn't confuse emotional intensity with wisdom, the one who pauses long enough to choose a response instead of surrendering to a reaction. That kind of composure is difficult to predict. More importantly, it's difficult to control. People who depend on emotional chaos eventually realize they've reached the limit of their influence. They can create noise, but they cannot decide what you believe. They can apply pressure, but they cannot choose your principles. They can invite you into conflict, but they cannot force you to abandon your peace. That realization is quietly transformative, not only for them, but for you, because you stop seeing strength as something you must constantly prove. You stop carrying the exhausting burden of convincing everyone else who you are. Instead, your confidence becomes rooted in something far more stable, your character. And character doesn't change every time circumstances do. This was never about winning against another person. It was about refusing to lose yourself. That's the difference. And once you truly understand it, every future challenge begins to look different. Every difficult conversation becomes another opportunity to practice awareness instead of impulse. Every moment of pressure becomes another reminder that your greatest advantage has never been domination. It has always been self-mastery. And that lesson doesn't end with this encounter. It becomes the standard you carry into every part of your life from this day forward. Section 11. Your new standard. From this moment forward, let your standard be different. Not because the world has suddenly become easier. Not because difficult people have disappeared. But because you have changed. There was a time when you may have believed strength had to be proven. That every challenge demanded an answer. That every misunderstanding required a defense. That every opinion about you deserved your attention. Not anymore. Now you understand something that many people spend their entire lives chasing but rarely find. Your peace is not a prize to be negotiated. Your character is not something to be rewritten by someone else's expectations, and your value does not rise or fall based on who applauds or who doubts. That's your new standard. You no longer measure yourself by how much noise you can make. You measure yourself by how much clarity you can keep when the noise begins. You don't count victories by how many arguments you win. You count them by how many unnecessary battles you wisely choose to leave behind. Because discernment is a form of strength. It asks a simple question before every decision. Does this deserve my energy? Sometimes the answer is yes. Many times it isn't. And knowing the difference can change the direction of your life. Emotional discipline doesn't mean becoming cold or disconnected. It doesn't mean pretending nothing affects you. It means refusing to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. It means giving yourself enough space to respond with intention instead of instinct. That kind of consistency is rare, not because it's impossible, because it must be practiced every single day. Some days you'll succeed with ease. Other days you'll catch yourself slipping back into old habits. That's not failure. That's the process of becoming more aware. Every moment you notice your reactions, pause, and choose a wiser path. You're strengthening something far more valuable than your reputation. You're strengthening your character, and character travels with you everywhere. Long after opinions change, long after circumstances shift, long after today's challenges become tomorrow's memories. So stop chasing recognition. Stop measuring your worth by conflict. Stop believing you must convince everyone of your strength. The people who truly understand will see it without explanation. And those who don't were never meant to define you in the first place. Carry yourself with quiet confidence. Choose your battles with wisdom. Protect your peace without apology. Because that isn't just a lesson you've learned. It's the standard you've chosen to live by. And that standard is what will guide you long after this moment is over. So here you are, not at the end of a battle, but at the beginning of a different way of living. The world will continue to test you. There will always be moments that invite you to react before you think, to trade your peace for a fleeting sense of victory, to let someone else's behavior decide who you become. Those moments aren't disappearing, but neither is the person you've become, because now you understand something that changes everything. The greatest victory has never been proving you're stronger than someone else. It's proving that your character is stronger than your circumstances. Anyone can remain calm when life is comfortable, The deeper test comes when pressure rises. Emotions pull in every direction, and every instinct tells you to abandon your principles for a moment of satisfaction. That's the moment that defines you, not because perfection is expected, but because every choice becomes another opportunity to return to the person you've decided to be. You no longer need every room to recognize your value. You no longer need every critic to approve your path. You no longer need every challenge to end with you having the last word. Some victories are loud. The ones that matter most are often silent. They happen when you leave a conversation without sacrificing your integrity. When you refuse to answer disrespect with more disrespect. When you choose clarity over chaos, wisdom over impulse, and purpose over pride. That is not weakness. It never was. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows that lasting strength is measured by consistency, not performance. So walk away stronger, not because life suddenly became easier, but because you no longer mistake every obstacle for an enemy. Some experiences are teachers. Some challenges reveal blind spots. Others simply remind you of the values you've worked so hard to build. Carry those values with you. Let your calm speak before your words do. Let your discipline guide your decisions. Let your integrity become your reputation, because people will always remember how you carried yourself under pressure far longer than they'll remember who won a single argument. And perhaps that's the final lesson. The strongest presence in any room is rarely the loudest. It's the person who remains grounded when everything around them demands instability. The person who cannot be pulled away from their principles. The person who has discovered that real power begins within. Walk forward with that understanding. Protect your peace. Strengthen your character, and let your life, not your reactions, be the proof of who you truly are.